Committee on the 24th of June 2022. Just check out start with the evacuation procedure.
Can you speak up, please?
Thank
you.
Yeah, we'll start with the evacuation procedure. There is a location plan of the exits and the assembly point situated on the doors of this room. Please familiarise yourself with it. Discovering the fire, please carry out the following: sound the alarm, attack the fire if possible and safe to do so using the appliance provided. Hearing the evacuation signal, please carry out the following: exit the building by your nearest safe exit. All visitors report to assembly point G or staff report to their designated assembly point on Walkaway car park. Do not leave the assembly point for any reason until told to do so by the incident control that or fire brigade. Item 2 is apologies. I've had apologies from councillors Hancock, McDonald and Parker. Are we aware of any others?
No, Chair.
So we'll note those apologies. Item 3, disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Are there any to declare? See any hands? To the main purpose of the meeting, we've been asked to consider an increase in the taxi fares. There's a report before us, which I'm going to ask Clive to just introduce. You don't mind, Clive?
Thank you, Chair. The council has received a request from members of the local handy carriage trade to increase fares. They pointed out that the council hasn't increased that table of fares since 2017. The primary driver, it seems, for that is the recent increase in fuel costs, which is obviously impacting the trade. And they have proposed a new set of fares, which is set out in paragraph 3.3, and would see an increase on the basic charge from for a hiring from £2.60 to £2.90, and then the charge for each additional mile of from £2 to £2.20. So obviously that's something that could mount up over a journey. The process that has to be followed is that initially the council considers whether to make these changes, and then if you decide to do so, or to make any other changes, because you're not set to make only the change, or sorry, not bound to make only the change that has been requested. That has to be then advertised locally, so it has to go in the newspaper, and then there's a period which has to be a minimum of 14 days for objections to be received. If objections to receive, then the council has to consider those, and they must then implement some revision, depending on what those representations are, within 2 months, or leave the fares as they are. So that 2 months runs from the date when we advertise the fare increase. As indicated, the trade have given certain information regarding the reasons why they want the fares to be increased. And so it's principally the cost of fuel. Of course, the other factor for members to bear in mind in relation to this is what impact that would then have on those who use taxis. Now, obviously, that is harder to ascertain simply because this is a request that's come from the trade, and obviously not all users are the same. But that's something that could potentially be drawn out by advertising these, and then if those matters are raised by the general public, you would have information at a future meeting to take into account and weigh the two up. And it's possibly worth mentioning, Chair, we've had some information which has been published recently by a trade journal, and it just shows that a lot of authorities have been putting up their fares recently. Now, that doesn't mean that we must do the same or abound in any way by that, but it's something which is happening in some of our surrounding areas, and so that may be useful background information, just if you like to think of the trade locally and the effect it's having. Now, since those figures have only initially been provided today, we've not been able to put them before members, but if you think, Chair, it'd be useful to get some other information as a benchmark, then that's something we can do. We can possibly provide that to you, within a matter of minutes.
I believe North Warwickshire is somewhere in the middle of that table at the moment.
That's right, Chair. It's obviously it's 360 different authorities, and many of them have very similar rates. So just the fact it's a long table doesn't mean every one of those is different. But compared to our existing rates, compared to some of the neighbouring authorities, such as say, or neighbouring necessarily, but very close by, Nuneaton Bedford for a 2-mile journey at present would be £6.75, whereas we £6.10. Wolverhampton would be £6.80 compared to us. Coventry have just increased theirs as well, £6.30. So we've not picked out all of those, but it's just an indication of some of the movement we've had. And obviously that's just represents a 2-mile journey, so it doesn't dissect in detail those costs.
We're allowed to discuss now,
Yeah.
Chair.
Is that?
Yes, Chair. Yes,
Councillor Jordan.
Can I just say that I noticed Appendix A1, the taxi firms were actually asking back in November of 2021 for a 20 pence increase on the starting point, if you like, 260 to 280. And then Appendix A2, which is not dated, they've only asked for like an extra 10 pence, where firstly, what date did Appendix A2 come in? And secondly, the fact that they're only asking for another 10 pence on top of what they originally asked for last November. I'm quite surprised with the fact that the fuel has gone up so much since January, that this is quite a minimal increase.
Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for me, some of the discussion points that immediately come to mind. If it's linked to the fuel that's gone up, that the rationale for the increases, does that mean that if the fuel does come down back to the levels that we'd all like it to be, that the increases will come down, or will they just sustain those prices? I would imagine they'll want to try and sustain those prices, so that's something to sort of take into consideration as well.
My understanding, Clive will correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the committee can review the fares at any time that it wants to. I'm a bit sceptical that they will ever come down. I think once prices go up, they tend to stay up. So they might stop going up, but they might not come down. But if they did dramatically fall, then I guess we could look at that.
Yeah, my other point is related to what Clive said about the extra cost being put onto the customer. I think in my head, 5-mile journey will be about an extra £1.30. So it depends whether the customers are going to be able to pay that. It might be self-defeating. You might get some people saying, "Well, I'll just not bother with the taxi. I'll try some other methods." So, not sure.
Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, following on to that, I did send a very late response, sorry. In connection with what Councillor Osborne said, can we, you say we could review it again later if the prices come down. I mean, could we make that condition? Sounds a bit of a strong word, but could we say, yeah, but yes, we agree to this, but if the prices start to fall again to some, it will be looked at, and we would expect the prices to come back down. If the fuel goes back to what it was, say, 6 months ago, the price of it, I think this should be.
From my point of view, I mean, the committee might agree with that. I don't know, but from my point of view, I'd rather wait and see what happens, and then if prices do come down, we review it at that point if we want to, and think it's appropriate to do so. Have you got the answer to that, Clive?
It's one of those things. Sometimes you already mentioned that we don't know what may happen with fuel prices, and everyone is hoping that it may down quite soon. Difficulty is we've got no way of projecting that. So maybe it is worth waiting until something happens if it's a consistent trend. But obviously, I think the thing to do in that situation would be possibly to consult, rather than simply bring it back to committee, perhaps to consult. And it might be wider than just trade, it might be users as well. And then there'll be further information, so the committee can look to again.
Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure every one of us sitting here has got a car somewhere or other. You know, the petrol rises are affected us all. And I am mindful to support this because obviously our taxi drivers have got families and homes and everything to run. But on the other flip of the coin is our residents as well. And some of our residents will think, right, I ain't going to jump in a taxi, it was easy. I'll walk now. But our elderly residents will still need these taxis to take them shopping, even if it's take shopping back, doctors, access to doctors and things like that. And I know we have Beeline out there that will take them to hospital and doctors' visits, but I know they're struggling. So I think really it's a shame that us local councils are having to sit here and make this decision that's been caused by the fuel hike. And again, if the petrol goes down, we do have a chance to come back and say, well, we're mindful to look at this again. I'd be more settled about what we're going to, the decision that we're going to make today here on behalf of our residents, but also our taxi drivers. I can only speak for the Atherstone taxi drivers, and I know our elderly think well done because they put the trolleys in the back of the car, they take the trolleys out of the car, they'll even take the shopping up to the door. So, you know, it is not.
Unfortunately, Councillor Clues, it is us who've got to make this difficult decision, isn't it? I think I agree very much with what you're saying, but I think we've also got to bear in mind that if the taxi drivers aren't making and covering their costs, we could be losing a large number of drivers to other areas, and then the service won't be available anyway. But Councillor Jordan, and then
Sorry, I did my earlier point. Perhaps I didn't explain it clearly enough. What I was trying to make out was they've already asked and put in a letter in on Appendix A1 asking for a 20 pence a mile increase last November, before fuel prices started getting out of control earlier on this year. So I say I'm mindful to agree to these increases, but I'm also mindful of the residents. But I think whether the fuel goes down or not won't help the businesses, if you like. It will, but it won't help them that much because they're after this increase for the fact of catching up over 5 years. So that was the point I was trying to make. I was asking last year for 20 pence, now they're asking for 30 pence, which is quite minimal compared with how fuel has gone.
Yeah. Councillor Humphreys first, then.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a difficult decision because we've got two heads on here. We've got our residents and we've got our taxi drivers who are also our residents in some cases. And I think it goes beyond fuel. They have to make sure their cars are roadworthy. They have to pay the bills to keep the cars on the road. They have to buy tyres, and all those things are going up as well. So it's the things that we don't see that are going up as well. Plus where they actually have their business in town, which we wouldn't want to see our taxi drivers leave Atherstone. So I think we've got a much bigger picture here to look after the people that are actually employed in Atherstone, which are our residents too. So yes, it is a very difficult position to be in, and our residents do need the taxis, and I am mindful to back this because of that. That whichever way we go, it's very difficult. But I think they are facing a difficult task in keeping their cars roadworthy to actually for us to drive in. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
I've got Councillor McLaughlin next, then Councillor Wright.
I just wanted to say, Chair, I'm finding this difficult as well. Obviously, the older people, especially in some of the more isolated places, rely on taxis. But on the other hand, there are a lot of other driving jobs around at the moment. And it's a fine line before, when do taxis become unviable? And drivers can find jobs quite easily. So I think we've really got to strike a balance So I'm still thinking about it, but probably will find myself voting in favour of it. Although I find that difficult.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Wright.
So Councillor Humphries has covered most of what I was going to say anyway. So I said these taxi drivers do work some unbelievable antisocial hours as well. So that's got to be taken into consideration also.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Moss.
Chairman, we're only rewarding them with allowing them to be rewarded with the same buying power, aren't they? It's not as if we're giving them a gigantic uplift.
Last one.
Yeah, I've been listening to what all the councillors have said. I think we're all in agreement that there's very much two sides to this. If I could have my way, perhaps like a preferential rate for the elderly with taxis who rely on it and probably have the price frozen for them, but not for others. But I don't think that's going to be viable. But the taxi drivers in Alliston and this area, particularly North Warwickshire, do a great job, as Denise has said. They support the elderly and vulnerable, and they've got to know them, and the elderly and people around there trust them. They bring their shopping back, all sorts of other extra things that they get from the taxi drivers. So I think we have a duty really to support the taxi drivers, however unpalatable the rise may be. I mean, I suppose we're giving them a pay rise. I've not sort of worked out in my head what rate that would be. But the way inflation is going at the minute, the cost of living, we all know about that. We've all discussed that at length. The petrol prices. Don't think we've really got any option but to support taxi drivers in trying to keep being a taxi driver and making it worth their while to actually carry out those duties. Because without them, I think we're going to be even worse off.
Just a brief one. It's sort of, I'm not labouring my earlier point at all, but as Councillor said, people may go for other jobs, and there are plenty of jobs around.
Baggage handlers at the airport.
And my thought about even mentioning, oh, but if the situation changes and prices go back down, we will look at it again with you, sort of thing. And then, because as Anne says, there are jobs for drivers out there. Well, if it starts to get difficult for them, they might think, well, sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. This is too stressful. I'll go and get a job where I'm going to get work. And then when things do hopefully come down, prices, they won't be there. All these people that elderly residents and others know and like, for their help. Those people won't be there yet. But they might not be because people think it might be going up and down again. So just to sort of have that, maybe just have that sort of conversation anyway, just to say we want it to stay and we want it to work like this. And that's kind of what I'm saying, if there's oh, sorry. What did you say?
We're in danger of a shortage of taxi drivers if we don't support them and decide to sort of go for something else or some other employment, then the people that they do have to support, like Denise and everybody else has mentioned, will be much more worse off.
Nice.
Thank you. Any other comments or points? Councillor
Just
Jordan.
one quick one, and going on what Councillor Farrow said, I'm mindful to support it, but I wouldn't want to put conditions on. Because I wouldn't want to put conditions.
No, conditions too strong.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think the mood of the meeting is that we're aware of the possible impact on residents on this, and we're very concerned about that. But we also want to have a thriving and vibrant taxi service in the area, and we realise the importance of maintaining that. So the recommendation before us, if I could read it out, is that the committee allow an increase in Hackney carriage fares as set out in the proposed table of fares contained in this report, and that if any objections to any agreed increase are received within the statutory period and not withdrawn, those objections are considered by a subcommittee of this committee.
So moved, Chair.
So that's been moved and seconded by Councillor Jordan. Can I have a show of hands of all in favour? That appears to be unanimous. I think that's the end of the meeting. So,
Chairman, could I just ask, all we've got in front of us, none of it's confidential, is it?
this is a public meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to circulate it to our fellow parish councillors, just out of interest.
I don't believe there's any.
No, no.
That's all right, is it? Thank you very much.
So with that, thank you, Councillor Moss. I'll close the meeting and thank you all for your attendance.
Thank you.